The perfect atmospheric song in a video game doesn't exist. Did I just reuse the same opening joke? Yes, I did. But due to the popularity of my Forest Temple theme video, I'm making this a series now. The Fire Temple certainly exists as a solid follow-up to the Forest Temple that preceded it, and while personally I don't think the music is quite as memorable, there's a somewhat interesting reason behind this. If you didn't know already, there's actually two different versions of the Fire Temple's theme. One that existed in the very early versions of the game, and the version that replaced it in all subsequent versions. But I'll get back to that in just a little bit. It turns out our boy Koji Kondo was sampling some music from a license-free track. Now, sampling music in video games is super common. Just take a look at this level in Street Fighter 3. Sound familiar? Side note, please don't copyright strike me, YouTube. And Koji Kondo himself has been known to pull musical influences from other musicians he likes. Even the Super Mario Bros. Overworld theme was heavily inspired by the Japanese fusion band T-Square's 1984 song Sister Marion. It's pretty safe to assume that Kondo was pouring through sample tracks looking to add a somewhat spooky vocal to the Fire Temple's theme. And in the particular sample CD he used, called Voice Spectral Volume 1, it was track 76 that made its way onto the original version of the song. Now, if you're hearing this and thinking, that doesn't sound like the Fire Temple theme to me, that's because the game you were playing was actually a later version of Ocarina of Time. It turns out the chanting Kondo sampled was an Arabic chant of a Muslim phrase. And while multiple different sources cite the phrase as saying something different, generally they all agree that the repetition used in the music is similar to someone reciting the Quran. And most of the translations involve statements like Allah is great, or there is no God but Allah. Either way, you can very clearly hear the vocalist say Allah. And well, if you know much about Nintendo's love for censorship, this wasn't going to fly. I mean, just look at this translation from the original Final Fantasy. Originally, if a character died, you had to take them to a priest to be revived. In North America, we had to take them to the clinic. Nintendo realized, sometime into the production of the first rounds of the cartridges, that this was in violation of their own rule against references to real-world religions. This is why in the later versions of the game, the original Fire Temple theme was removed, replacing the chants with a kind of low moan. They also changed the symbols on some of the push blocks and the original mirror shield, which featured a crescent moon, similar to the star and crescent symbol normally associated with Islam. There were some rumors that Nintendo made these changes after the game was released due to backlash from the Muslim community. But in reality, they hadn't even released the game yet when someone pointed out, hey, these are real-world religious symbols, we probably shouldn't have those. And they put in the changes. It's unclear how many of the cartridges with the original version of the song exist in the wild, but it's safe to assume that Nintendo had printed enough of them that they didn't want to go back and change the data stored on all of them. But also didn't want to miss out on the sales of the games, so they published them anyways. It's pretty cool, because you can actually look on the back of the N64 cartridge you have and figure out which version of the game you own. On the sticker on the back, there will be a code etched into the card itself. If there are just two numbers, then you have version 1.0, which includes the original music. If you have two numbers and the letter A, you have version 1.1, which also includes the original music. But if you have two numbers and the letter B, then you have version 1.2, which has the updated track and the changes to the symbols. What's also wild is that in version 1.0 and 1.1, Ganondorf's blood was actually red, in a Nintendo game rated E for everyone. Now, let's get into talking about the two different tracks, what their differences are, and what feelings they evoke for the ambiance of the temple. And first off, I wanted to say that I wasn't able to find sheet music for the entire song, so we'll be going off of the pieces that I was able to find. And, similar to the Forest Temple, the Fire Temple's theme is split into three main parts. No matter which version you have, they both start the same. You get a series of drums and chimes with a somewhat ominous wind blowing behind it. and this continues for about 40 seconds. This is smart thematically, because it is somewhat of a combination of the sort of heavy air from the Death Mountain crater just before it, which actually reuses the song from Dodongo's Cavern, but with a bubbling sound added for the lava below. And adds the percussion from the Goron village. Drums seem to play a large part in Goron culture throughout the entire Zelda franchise, but that's a topic for another video. Like I said, no matter which version you're listening to, this part stays the same, and it carries throughout the rest of the song. The versions don't diverge until about 40 seconds in. At this point, the original version starts to add the chant. Now, the feeling this imparts is up for a lot of interpretation. I've seen a few people online state that they originally thought that this was the Gorons praying not to be eaten by Volvagia, the dragon boss at the end of the dungeon. I'm not sure how I feel about this personally, but there is a sort of shrine at the opening of the level, and in-game it is referred to as the Fire Temple. Since Volvagia was destroyed here a long time ago by a legendary Goron hero, it is possible that this is a sacred place to the Gorons, who would come here to pray. Although I'd argue that Kondo's alteration to the original vocals of the track adds slightly more unnervedness than a normal prayer, which was probably his intent as, hey, this is a dungeon. In the updated version, the chanting was replaced with a pretty boring moan sound that many people speculate is just reused vocals from the Shadow Temple theme. And I gotta say, I definitely think they're spot on with this one. And I think the Shadow Temple's theme was also repurposed for the next part of the song as well, but I'll get to that in a minute. For both of the tracks, this section continues until the minute and 25 mark, and then they get to the next section. In the original version, extra chanting is laid on top of the original chanting, and seems a lot less distorted than the first section. This sequence is much more clearly a single voice crying out above the rest, which could very much tie into the whole Goron prayer idea, as all the Gorons in their cages could be chanting a theme over and over, while another Goron, leading the others, sings above them. Similar to a sort of call and response that many religions all over the world do. And while I'd probably say that a Japanese guy writing music for video games at the end of the 20th century probably wasn't listening to other world religions and using them for his songs, the first room of the temple literally features what looks to be a pretty clear reference to either Native American totem poles or, more likely, tikis from Pacific Islander civilizations. And the Goron culture itself is heavily inspired by various real-world tribal cultures. So it seems pretty reasonable to believe that maybe he was inspired by real-world religions. Koji Kondo is smart, man. As for the updated version, it moves on from the deep bass moans to a higher-pitched ethereal female voice, which also definitely comes from the Shadow Temple. And while I've heard a lot of people say that the chanting in the original version makes them uncomfortable, I really hate this ethereal sound. It sounds to me like someone's soul is getting drained from their body, which is cool in the Shadow Temple. It's literally Ghost City. But in the center of a volcano, it just seems out of place. Going off of what we know, I imagine this was a quick fix from Kondo and his team to get a new song out so Nintendo could continue to manufacture cartridges. Funnily enough, the song Koji Kondo sampled in the original Fire Temple theme has also been used in other video games, most notably in Cruisin' World while the player is driving through Egypt. And it was also originally featured in Street Fighter V's Thailand stage. Before quickly being replaced to avoid controversy, similar to what Nintendo did. And there you have it, the story of Ocarina of Time's Fire Temple theme song, the rumored controversy behind it, and what music theory we can apply to the creation of it and the emotion it was designed to invoke. And hey, speaking of samples being used in Zelda music, Even my beloved Forest Temple theme borrowed from a sample CD called Ethnic Volume 1 with the track African 098-B. If you enjoyed this video today, please consider subscribing to our channel, as I plan to do more videos like this going over the rest of Ocarina of Time's temples. And we do other video essay content on gaming history, so give it a look. We also do a live show that we record every week on our Twitch page, where we discuss the current week's news in gaming, and if you watch along live, you can vote to determine who wins for that week. Also, we have a Discord where you can chat with us, as well as a Patreon where if you support us at just the $1 level, you get access to an exclusive episode every month. But that's going to do it for this week. Thank you very much again for watching, and have a wonderful day.